The day I found out my fiancé had been stealing from me, I was sitting in a conference room on the 14th floor of a downtown Toronto office building, listening to a stranger tell me things about the man I loved that I couldn't make myself believe. I remember thinking the chairs were uncomfortable. It's a strange thing to notice in a moment like that, but I kept shifting in my seat while Patrick Greaves— no, not Patrick, that name was already used— while the lawyer across from me slid a folder in my direction, and I remember the sound it made on the glass table, a soft, papery drag, like something being pulled out from under me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Renata. I was 31 years old when my life split into a before and an after. I was a high school guidance counselor at a public school in Mississauga, which isn't the kind of job people make movies about. Nobody writes dramas about the woman sitting in a small office with motivational posters and a box of tissues, listening to teenagers talk about university applications and broken families. But I loved it. I loved the ordinariness of it, the way a good day meant a student walked out of my office standing a little straighter than when they came in. I had been doing that job for 6 years when I met Joel. We met at a friend's backyard barbecue in late August, one of those nights that still felt like summer, but smelled like the beginning of fall. I'd had a long week, the kind where every conversation required more of me than I had, and I'd told my friend Petra I wasn't coming. Then she called me a second time, and I went, because Petra had a way of asking things that made saying no feel like a personal failing. Joel was standing near the patio railing with a beer he hadn't touched, looking at the backyard like he was trying to memorize it. I thought that was interesting. Most people at parties try to look like they belong. He looked like he was somewhere else entirely. We talked for 3 hours. He was charming in a way that felt unperformed. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He laughed at things that were genuinely funny. He didn't check his phone once. He was an investment consultant, he said. He worked with small businesses, helped them manage their finances and plan for growth. He had grown up in Hamilton, went to McMaster, moved to the GTA for work, and never quite managed to feel settled there. I keep thinking I'll feel at home eventually, he said. 6 years and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe you're looking for it in the wrong places, I said. He smiled at that. Maybe. We exchanged numbers before I left. He texted me the next morning. By October, we were spending every weekend together. By December, I had a spare key to his apartment in Etobicoke, and he had one to mine. I told myself I was being careful. I'd had one serious relationship before Joel, and it had ended badly enough that I'd spent a year being cautious around every new person I met. But Joel made cautiousness feel like a waste of time. He was consistent. He showed up when he said he would. He remembered the small things. That I hated cilantro, that I got headaches when I didn't drink enough water, that I needed 15 minutes of quiet in the morning before I could be a person. My mother liked him, which meant something. She's not an easy woman to impress. Petra liked him too, though she took a little longer. Petra had been my best friend since second year of university. When we'd been placed in the same residence floor and bonded over a shared hatred of our RA's passive-aggressive notes about dish cleanliness. She was a speech-language pathologist now, sharp and funny, and the kind of person who asked good questions. She met Joel at Christmas and said afterward, "He seems solid. Don't overthink it." I wasn't overthinking it. I was, for the first time in a long time, just living. Joel proposed in the spring, 18 months after we met. We were at Rattlesnake Point, out in Milton. He'd taken me hiking, which I'd complained about an entire drive there, and then didn't complain about at all once we were on the trail because it was genuinely beautiful in a way that made me feel ungrateful for having resisted. We were sitting on a flat rock at the edge of the escarpment, looking out over the valley, and he asked me. It wasn't elaborate. He didn't have a photographer hidden in the trees. He just looked at me and said he'd been trying to figure out how to do this for weeks, and then he decided that trying too hard would make it feel like a performance, and what he wanted to say was simple. He wanted to keep doing this. All of it. The hikes I complain about and the quiet mornings and the fights about whose turn it is to call the landlord. He wanted to do it together for the rest of his life. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set the date for the following June. We decided on something small, a ceremony at a provincial park lodge near Collingwood. 40 guests, dinner under the string lights on the back deck. Joel handled most of the logistics, which I thought was generous. He said he enjoyed it, that he liked having something concrete to organize. I took care of the things that required more personal judgment. The guest list, the music, the flowers. I look back at those months now, and I can see the things I missed. They're obvious in retrospect, the way the edge of something dangerous is obvious once you know to look for it. Joel started coming home later. He said it was a demanding period at work, that a few of his clients were going through difficult transitions and needed more of his time. I believed him. I'd seen him work. He was thorough, almost compulsive about it. It didn't seem out of character. He was more distracted when he was home. I chalked it up to stress. When I asked how he was, he'd say fine in a way that closed the conversation, and I let it close because I understood what it felt like to carry the weight of other people's problems all day. I thought I was giving him space. I thought I was being a good partner. Petra asked me once, around February, whether everything was okay with us. We were at a coffee shop on Queen Street, both of us with our hands wrapped around large lattes, and she looked at me with the expression she got when she was about to say something careful. "He seems a little checked out," she said. "When we had dinner last month, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. He's been stressed." I said, "Work stuff." Petra nodded. She didn't push it. I should have let her. 3 months before the wedding, Joel suggested we consolidate some of our finances ahead of the ceremony. It made sense, he said, to start functioning as a unit before the paperwork made it official. We opened a joint account. He transferred some money in. I transferred some money in. He said it would be easier to pay for the remaining wedding deposits from one place. I didn't think about it much. He was the one with the financial expertise. I trusted him. The last red flag came the week before the wedding, and even then, I almost missed it. I was picking up our marriage license from the city clerk's office in Brampton. Joel had offered to do it but had back-to-back client meetings, and while I was waiting, I ran into someone Joel had mentioned once or twice. A former colleague, I thought he'd said. His name was Aaron, and he looked surprised to see me. "Renata," he said. "Hey, how are you?" "Getting excited for next Saturday." "Very," I said. "Are you coming?" "I thought Joel put you on the list." Aaron's expression did something complicated. "I didn't get an invitation," he said. "But that's okay. We haven't been close in a while." He paused. "He's doing well, though?" "Last I heard, he'd left the firm." "He's at a different firm now," I said. "Independent consulting." Aaron nodded slowly. "Right," he said. "Right." I thought about that conversation for about 2 hours, and then I filed it under strange but not worth worrying about and kept moving. The week before a wedding is not a week where you have room for doubt. The morning of the ceremony, I woke up at 6 to a phone call. It was the father of one of my students. His daughter, I'll call her Maya, was in grade 11. She'd been struggling all year, quietly, in the way some kids do, and I'd been working with her for months. She'd opened up to me recently about some things going on at home, things serious enough that I'd had to involve a social worker, carefully, in a way that tried to keep her trust intact. Her father was calling because something had happened overnight. He was at the hospital with Maya. She'd had a breakdown of some kind. Not physical, but the kind that looks physical, the kind where a kid ends up curled on the floor, and can't stop shaking, and someone calls 911 because they don't know what else to do. He was asking for me. Maya was asking for me. I stood in my kitchen in my pajamas, holding my phone, and looked at the clock. The ceremony wasn't until 3 in the afternoon. It was 6:14 in the morning. I called the hospital. I spoke to a nurse who put me through to the attending physician who explained what was happening. Maya was stable but frightened. She'd been asking for me specifically. Her father's voice, when I'd spoken to him, had been the voice of a man who was completely out of his depth. I texted Joel, "Something's come up with a student. Going to the hospital. We'll explain everything later." Back well before 3, he read it. He didn't respond. I got dressed, I got in my car, I drove to Credit Valley Hospital in Mississauga. I will not go into the details of what Maya was going through, because those details are hers. What I will say is that I sat with her for a long time, and then I sat with her father for a long time, and then I helped them navigate a conversation with a crisis worker who came in to do an assessment. It took longer than I thought. Everything like that takes longer than you think. By the time Maya was calm and her father had a plan and I had made sure they knew what the next steps were, it was past noon. I checked my phone. I had 6 missed calls. 5 from my mother, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. No missed calls from Joel. I called my mother while I was walking to my car. She picked up on the first ring. "Where are you?" She said, "I'm just leaving the hospital." "Mom," I explained in the text, "Renata." Her voice had something in it I couldn't name. "You need to come to the venue. You need to come right now." "I'm coming. I still have time." "He moved the time up," she said. "He called everyone this morning and said the ceremony was starting at noon." I stopped walking. "He told everyone the time was noon," she said again. "We all assumed you knew. We thought you were already here and we were waiting for you to come down from getting ready." She stopped. "The ceremony started 45 minutes ago, sweetheart." I stood in the hospital parking lot in the dress I'd thrown on to drive to the hospital, not my wedding dress, just a dress, and I tried to understand what she was saying. "He changed the time," I said. "Yes." "And he didn't tell me." Silence. "Mom," I said, "is the ceremony over?" She took a long time to answer. "You need to come," she said. "Come right now." I drove to Collingwood faster than I should have. I remember the highway. I remember my hands on the wheel. I remember a podcast I'd been listening to on the way to the hospital was still playing, and I couldn't find the button to turn it off. So I drove 90 minutes listening to 2 people talk about home renovation, which is possibly the most surreal detail of the worst day of my life. When I pulled into the lodge parking lot, the first person I saw was my cousin standing outside with her arms crossed over her chest and an expression I'd never seen on her face before. She walked toward me before I was fully out of the car. "Renata," she said. "Tell me," I said. She shook her head slowly. "Come inside. Tell me right now." She looked at me for a moment. "He married someone else," she said. "He married Serena." I had known Serena for 4 years. She was Joel's colleague, or I thought she was just a colleague. She was the one who'd hosted the holiday party at her condo in Oakville that Joel and I had gone to 2 years running. She was funny and pretty, and I'd always thought she seemed slightly dismissive of me in a way I told myself I was imagining. I walked inside. The reception area of the lodge smelled like cedar and catered food. The string lights were on. The flowers I had chosen were on the tables. My 40 guests were in the room, most of them avoiding eye contact. And at the far end of the space, Joel was standing next to Serena. And Serena was in a white dress, and there was a man I recognized as the officiant still holding his book. Joel's mother was the first person to speak. She was standing near the entrance, and when I walked in, she positioned herself in front of me with a look of such sharp contempt that I actually stopped walking. "You should leave," she said. Her voice was low but not quiet enough. Several heads turned. "This isn't your moment anymore. You made your choice when you didn't show up." I looked past her at Joel. He didn't look at me. He was looking at the floor, and something about the way he was standing, slightly angled away, very still, told me he had known I was going to walk in, and he had decided in advance not to look at me when I did. That detail undid me more than anything else, the decision of it. I turned and walked back outside. My mother found me sitting on a stone bench by the parking lot. She sat down beside me without saying anything, and she put her arm around me, and I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. I just sat there and thought about Aaron's face in the clerk's office, and Petra's question in February, and the mornings I'd let close without pushing, and the way Joel had texted back within minutes about dinner plans, but had never responded to the message I sent from the hospital parking lot. The weeks after were the kind I don't have complete memories of. I moved back into my apartment. I'd been subletting it since Joel and I had started talking about moving in together, and I had to call my tenant, who was gracious about it. And that small grace nearly made me cry in a way the wedding hadn't. I went back to work. I sat with students and I listened to them and I helped them with their problems. And sometimes I sat in my car after work for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. Petra drove to Mississauga almost every weekend. She brought groceries and stayed for hours. And sometimes we didn't even talk. We just watched television. And that was enough. My mother called every day without making it feel like surveillance. That's a skill I didn't appreciate until then. About 2 months after the wedding that wasn't, I got a call from a law firm. Not about the wedding, about money. It turned out the joint account had been more active than I knew. Joel had been transferring money out of it consistently in the weeks before the ceremony, pulling funds through a series of small transactions that individually didn't trigger alerts. He'd also, I learned, been accessing a line of credit connected to my name that I hadn't known existed. We'd filled out some financial paperwork together months earlier, and I hadn't read everything carefully enough, which I have to live with. He'd taken roughly $23,000 by the time anyone noticed. I sat in that conference room on the 14th floor and listened to the lawyer explain this to me. And I thought about the chairs, and I thought about the sound the folder had made on the glass. The lawyer, whose name was David Chen, and who was efficient and kind in a way that surprised me, told me there was a civil case to be made. He also told me that this wasn't the first time. Joel had been named in a small claims matter 2 years earlier, in Kitchener, involving a former business partner who alleged he'd manipulated a shared financial account in almost the same way. "Did you know about this?" he asked me. "No," I said. "He was on the losing side of that judgment," he said. "He still hasn't paid it." I thought about Aaron again. Last I heard he'd left the firm, the careful way he'd said it. "What are my options?" I asked. David walked me through them. I won't say the legal process was fast or satisfying in any cinematic way, because it wasn't. Canadian civil courts don't move quickly, and there are weeks and months in between steps where nothing seems to be happening, and you just have to keep living your life. But I filed, and because Joel had a documented pattern, the prior judgment, the paper trail from our joint account, records that David's team was able to obtain, we had a stronger case than I'd expected. I got most of the money back. Not all of it, but most. Joel and Serena's marriage lasted less than a year. I found this out, not because I was looking for it, but because Petra told me, matter-of-factly, over the phone, one evening when we were talking about something else entirely. Apparently, there were financial complications. Apparently, Serena's family had been quite clear about what they expected, and Joel had not delivered. I did not feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I felt something more like the quiet after a long noise. What I kept from all of it was something unexpected, About 6 months after the civil case was resolved, I got a message from Maya's father. Maya had finished grade 11. She was applying to the social work program at Ryerson. At TMU, I corrected myself, they'd renamed it, and she'd asked him to reach out to me because she wanted me to know. She said that the morning I'd driven to the hospital instead of going to my own wedding had mattered to her in a way she was still figuring out how to talk about. I read that message 3 times. I used to have a particular kind of anxiety about being needed at the wrong moment, about being a person whose professional obligations would always pull at the edge of everything else. I had thought, when Joel changed the time without telling me, that it was proof of something I'd feared. That I was somehow too much of a counselor, and not enough of a woman who could hold her life together. I know better now. Showing up for Maya that morning was not a mistake I made. It was not a choice I should have weighed differently. Joel changed the time knowing I was at a hospital. He didn't answer my text knowing what it meant. He handed me the appearance of failure so that he could step into something he'd already arranged. He had made a calculation. I was just living my life. And Maya is going to be a social worker. I'm still a guidance counselor in Mississauga, still in the same small office with the motivational posters and the tissues. I repainted the walls this past spring. A soft blue-green that my principal said looked like a spa, and I said looked like somewhere it was safe to sit down. I have a new plant on my windowsill. I'm dating someone, slowly, in the way you do when you've learned what it costs to rush. Some things I know now that I didn't know then. A person who loves you will answer a text from a hospital parking lot. A person who has planned your humiliation will let it ring. The morning I got the message from Maya's father, I sat with it for a while. Then I got up, made coffee, and went to work. That's the whole story, and it's enough.